Hello, my name is Joel McLeod.
I'm Laura Steiner.
And welcome to another episode of the 905er podcast. Today we're doing a bit of an old school, old-fashioned rant episode, because why not? We're welcoming back to the podcast longtime friend, longtime ranter, along with us, Laura Steiner from the Milton Reporter. Laura, thanks for coming on and joining us on this Easter Monday morning.
Thanks for having me.
Two things we wanted to talk about that we thought were ripe for a good old taken to the woodshed analysis. The first one is the Ontario government's, I'm going to say, forcing municipalities in the 905 and across the province in general, but let's focus on the 905, to take a municipal housing pledge, which is the province goes to these various municipalities and says, you have to build X thousand of housing units by, I'm going to say, I believe it was 2031, which is in keeping with the province's overall plan to build 1.5 million new homes in that time period. And this is kind of how they're going to break it down. So it's, not, all of one region doesn't have to build 1.5 million new homes. Which sounds kind of practical on the surface, but the question we kind of had, or I kind of had, was where's all this eagerness from these municipalities to sign on to this pledge, especially when a lot of these municipalities got elected on the idea of they needed to take back the planning process and they need to start building their homes or these municipalities in the way that they want control over, they want to have access to. Perfect example, here in Burlington, the Burlington City Council pledged to build, I believe it was 29,000 new homes. I could be wrong, but the point is they 29,000 new homes here in Burlington. Now, the entire council got elected on the basis of we've lost control of development in Burlington, that too many high rises are being built and not enough homes, and it's just Burlington's losing its quote unquote its flavor and whatnot. Going next door to Hamilton, Hamilton recently had the big hoopla over the White Belt controversy, where the city council said no, we're not going to develop it. Province said no, you are now, and that they now had a pledge to build 47,000 new homes. This came down from the Municipal Affairs Minister Steve Clark, and ultimately the council voted 12-2 in support of this favor. Now they said they're going to build just within the original urban boundary, but still, my question to you guys is, where's the backbone of some of these municipalities to say, where's our say in this brave new future of development in Ontario?
Laura, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure, I'll go first.
I'm just working up a head of steam here.
I just actually, as we were talking about this before the podcast, I was Googling trying to figure out what Milton's target was, and it's 21,000 homes by 2031. I was partway through an article, but apparently that target is not legally enforceable. But let's going back for a few years. It's been, trying to choose my words a little more carefully here, but there's the broader impression that Milton Council is a bit friendlier towards developers, and there's a general sense of fear of being stuck at the LPAT for whole swaths for years, these larger developments. So that's probably why you get the whole Burlington Council so ready to sign on, and maybe all of these councils, is because no one wants to spend the money to fight at LPAT to take a decision if it doesn't favor a municipality to court. And that's going to be hard a hard spend of tax dollars to defend in the long run than just swallowing it now and signing on to these pledges. So
yeah, I mean, why do cities sign them? Even if Burlington's case, certainly a good proportion of the council was elected on a platform of kind of controlling development, because they have no choice. Because of course they've got to sign. If you don't do what the province asks you to do, then they'll be punished one way or the other. But as Laura said, the legal side of it is not the actual threat here. The threat is if you don't play along with the province's games, that you fall out of favor with the province, and they'll find some way to be spiteful to you, because that's the way these games work. Insofar as the idea of cities signing up to guarantee an amount of development, can I just point out just how utterly, and utterly for a third time, ridiculous that concept is in the entire context of how planning happens in this province and across North America. How do houses get built? We don't have public housing to speak of, not any significant degree in North America, certainly not in Ontario. So how does development happen? Well, a developer goes to a city and says, I want to build some houses on this lot of land that I own. Am I allowed to? And the city says yes or no. And that's the theory anyway. So the city has no power whatsoever to build a single house other than that tiny amount of public housing that does get built. And actually, that's done by the region, not by the cities. So it's not even a city responsibility. So all the city can do is wait around and wait for those applications to come in. Nothing they can do to speed that process up. When the applications come in, sure, the city can then, in theory, slow things down. It can reject applications. It can ask for changes. It can do all this stuff. But how does it work in fact? In fact, if the development's application is within the official plan, which, by the way, is signed off by the province and which is, a legally binding document, then that property will be built as of right. There's no appeals. There's no nothing. The city can't just on a whim turn anything down. It will be built. The only reason things take so damn long in this province is because nothing comes in under the official plan. Everything gets appealed. And either the city says, I'll just build it anyway, or it goes to LPAT. And there at the LPAT, it will sit for 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, however long, waiting to be dealt with and to be sorted out. And then everything at LPAT is basically approved in one way or the other. It's basically a matter of negotiation between the city and the developer as to what actually gets built. So the whole delay comes into it because there's absolutely no clarity on any development about what can actually be built, because the city says this is what should happen. And the province says, no, we're going to second guess every single building to see if we actually want it built or not. It's the province and the province's ridiculous bloody system that creates these massive, massive delays and everything. Plus the fact that the planning staff are completely overworked. They don't have enough money to hire the people to do the amount of work they're faced with. The fact that the environmental protections side of things is now being thrown onto them, as well as a shorter period for them to actually try and do the jobs that they are legally obliged to do regardless. It's an absolutely ridiculous situation. So, what does this change? Nothing. There is not a single thing that any city in this province can do to change the amount of development of proposals that come to them, or how long it takes for them to go through those proposals. What happens after? Frankly, you could abolish the cities from the process, and the process will still be incredibly slow because someone would still have to do all this work. I think someone has to oversee that. There's enough bricks to hold the building up, and that they're actually going to include sewers and roads and stuff like that.
But I think you hit the nail on the head with it's one change thing. But what it does change is who's to blame for when it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's passing the buck.
It's like the problem is that we've already we've talked about it before on this podcast. The province has pledged this 1.5 million new homes by 2031, which is, to say it's an ambitious target is to say the least. No one in the history of Canada has ever built 1.5 million homes in that time period. It's never happened. So for the province to say, we're going to do it, okay, that's impressive. The problem is, to date, new home builds haven't kept up with the expected targets. What's needed each year to build to meet that target of 1.5 million new homes. The new builds have just not met the targets. The understanding is the projected new builds is going to continue to go down because inflation and cost of building these targets has gone up. It is not, the market does not favor new builds right now. How can that, like, these are things outside of hands, but quite frankly, we're at a point where I don't think, the economy isn't good enough. We need that housing yesterday. We needed that housing a decade ago, and we didn't. We're now in a position where we are basically up the creek without a paddle, folks. We need the housing now to regulate housing prices, to find places to live, and we're not there. And rather than either, as Roland said, the province and the feds kind of get their heads out of their collective butts and say, we're just going to build affordable, socialized housing, and say that's the priority. Just go in and just build, which, according to the last couple of budgets from both Ontario and Ottawa, that's not happening. So they're leaving it up to the developers to do it, and the developers saying, well, it's not in our interest to build that kind of housing. It's not economically viable for us. So we're stuck in this. So what this does is say, well, if they're not going to put the pressure on the developers to build the necessary housing, and I do mean pressure, like, you tax them or you fine them for not building. One thing that I thought, a vacancy tax on owned undeveloped land could entice people to do so. But that's not coming down the wire. We're not going to hit that target. So what does this do? This leaves it to the minister, Steve Clark and Doug Ford, to say it's that pesky city council in Hamilton, that pesky city council in Milton or in Markham or in Richmond Hill. You guys didn't meet your targets. It's your fault that we didn't hit that 1.5 million homes in 10 years' time. And that's all this is. This is you're right, Roland, it's a passing of the buck, and it's covering their butt so that when come election time, they say, we are nowhere close to this target, people. They say, well, it's not our fault. It's that pesky city council around the 905 that aren't holding up their end of the agreement.
Oh, and we'll come back to that. Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
It's also going back to the whole planning process. I mean, like, the province doesn't live in these. I mean, a lot of people making the decision at the provincial level don't live in the communities affected.
Good point.
That's been Milton's whole argument for the last several years, as they've fought sort of to grow and to be constructive about it. And it's also about how municipalities are designed. Like, this sticks out of my mind that talking at council about how narrow the streets in the newer subdivisions are, how narrow these garages. There's people complaining about how they couldn't get like a minivan inside the garage because the garage is too narrow. And it's like, I had to really bite my tongue to keep from saying, well, you sat on a council that approved these developments the way they are. Where was this conversation 3 years ago when that was going through approval? So it's kind of, and the other thing is, maybe it's time to start talking about really rethinking how we see sort of the conventional home. I know the provincial idea, and certainly that utopian idea, is to have single family homes, nice little plot of land, kids playing, two kids in the backyard playing, and all of this. And municipalities, at least in the southern Ontario, where we are pretty crammed for land, getting pretty crammed for land here, it's not like it's not realistic anymore to do that. And it's probably time we started.
Well, and the province, to be fair to the province, which I don't enjoy doing, but I will be in this case. I mean, they have in the legislation last year, I can't remember which bill number it was or what act number it was, but that there was it's kind of been overshadowed by everything that's happened since, but there was legislation about opening up that kind of missing middle development, so enabling more development in existing single family home neighborhoods to allow for duplexes, triplexes, up to sort of 6-story apartment buildings, things like that, which is a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. This idea of kind of these uniform cookie cutter single family home neighborhoods where you're utterly car dependent. I mean, I think it was the narrower streets you were talking about in Milton. I mean, Burlington had a development, I think it was the Orchard, I can't remember, where they had narrower streets. And the idea was, we want people to be less car-centric, to be able to walk around the community, for the streets to be safe for children. All admirable objectives. But here's the problem with the Orchard. There's no bloody bus transit around. When there is some, but it's very limited. You basically got to leave the Orchard to get the bus.
Yeah.
So as a result, everybody's
the buses can't fit on those streets.
When the buses can't, yes, that too. So the kind of, I mean, as so often with city planning, no disrespect to city planners, the ideology and the reality just don't really
it comes down that the planning process as it's supposed to work was you create an official plan. So the idea is like, this is what the entire city will look like in 10 years time, right? A general guideline of we expect this much density in this neighborhood. This is where businesses will go, and this is how we're going to plan out the urban transit network, et cetera. Okay, that all looks great on paper. The problem is when you get into, the developer wants to change the plan to allow more people in a particular neighborhood, or to put fewer people in a particular neighborhood, perhaps to allow more, larger homes and whatnot. That throws off the plan, because to meet those targets, that means you have to push people into a different neighborhood to meet your targets, which throws off the plan, and things don't look as you had intended.
Well,
and it kind of comes down to the whole process of like that the constant being able to appeal throws off the vision of, okay, well, we had a plan to meet these targets. We're going to, 10 years time, we're going to meet the targets in this way. When the developer says, oh no, I want to build a high rise here and I want to add in another 500 units. Okay, that's great. But you say, well, no, that means there's a greater density there, which means later density there, which means no, it doesn't make sense to build an urban transit system then, because only people in this neighborhood are going to need it, et cetera. Like it all these things matter.
The everything comes back to the LPAT. I mean, you can say I'm obsessed about it or not, but it all comes back to that. I mean, ironically, Doug Ford's, the dear departed Rob Ford was one of the chief advocates of the idea that an official plan should be an official plan and should be, unless there's an extremely good reason, then if it says 10 stories on the official plan, then 10 stories it is. And, the cities are obligated to update their official plans. The province has to sign off on the official plan, as does the region. These things go through multiple stages of everybody saying, yeah, that's a good plan. Now, I mean, I was kind of involved in the whole, shit show, for a better word, of Burlington's official plan process. And I saw, the new official plan from Rick Goldring's era be approved, go through and start to be used. The very first development that came through, the bright, shiny new official plan, which was going to solve all the problems, was massively over the new height limits that the official plan had introduced. Massively, double. I can't remember how many it was. If it was 15, they asked for 25. If it was 18, they asked for 28. I can't remember what it was exactly. Second plan, the second proposal that came along, massively, even more massively over the bright, shiny new official plan. Then that official plan was thrown out because you had a new council in Marianne Mead Ward, and the proposals kept on coming in month by month, new proposals, all blowing out the water every official plan, old, new, whatever. And of course, they're all now currently sitting in various stages of appeal and everything else. Where they've now been for 4 years and counting. We're into our 5th year of some of these proposals sitting at LPAT and goodness knows what. So, and you said a few minutes ago, Joe, it's like, no one has ever built the kind of housing supply that we need at the speed that we need. And it's like, yeah, no, that's absolutely right. In North America, no one has ever done that because North America doesn't have public housing to speak of. Or certainly Canada doesn't, or certainly Ontario doesn't. If you want to see places that have built exactly that kind of speed and exactly that kind of volume very successfully for decades on end, you have to look at Europe, where public housing was, like after the Second World War, countries built huge estates. Now, are those estates perfect? No, there's all kinds of problems with them very often, but not all, the vast majority are absolutely fine. But cities became landlords and were in the business of building high quality, well-maintained, affordable housing for large numbers of blue collar workers and everything else. So you can do it, but
we can do
the
it
will
now.
isn't there.
We can do it now. Like, I don't think we need the will to do it. I think the problem is we just, nobody has the backbone to stand up to developers and say, you're going to build what we want, how we want, when we want it. And that's ultimately what this comes down to, is that, I'm a big proponent of inclusionary zoning, which is when when a developer comes to the city and says, I want to build this neighborhood, or I want to build this high rise, a fixed percentage of those units, I'm going to say 10%, because I think we need to get the number up there, but 10% of all those units go into a regional housing corporation. So they just automatically take ownership of them, and they can then rent them out or lease them out on a fixed income schedule for as basically as public housing. And I think that would increase the number of socialized public assisted housing on the market, bringing down market pricing. But the government doesn't have to go rushing out to say, okay, because right now we're in a problem. We don't have the volume there to make this work. The province and the feds have just not built. And I don't think they have the tax, the kitty in the bank to just go and build the 1.5 million homes that are required in Ontario to satisfy this demand. So we're in between a rock and a hard place. You're going to have to push back on developers and say, no, you need to build. You're going to have to build, hand some over to the public good, and use things like a vacancy tax for municipalities to pressure the vast areas of land that exist all over the 905 of undeveloped land that are owned, but waiting for the right quote unquote market factors to make it an enticable moment to go build. Say, well, we're going to make it because we're just now going to make it an onerous financial burden for you just to sit on undeveloped land. You now need to go and develop it. And yeah, we're going to flood the market with 1.5 million homes over 10 years, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? That's why we need the 1.5 million, is to bring down housing prices and make housing affordable for families to live, work, and play in the 905 and Ontario as a whole. That's my rant.
Well, to sort of poke a couple of holes there.
No, we're all done. That's it. That's time for today.
In Milton, there's large swaths of rural area up north of the 401, Campbellville, Brookville, Moffat, and largely they're not. There's some pockets where they're building the larger estate homes, but with some land around them, but it's mostly farmland. And and there's probably a reason for it. It's all green belt. It's all, well, you could debate the green belt is another podcast.
That's a different episode altogether.
But there's green belt, there's Niagara Escarpment Commission, there's all of these other hoops to jump through. It's probably why no developer has ever tried to go up there, is because by the time you're done,
and it's also because in Milton there's plenty of white belt. Milton has a lot of white belt land still, which the developers already own, and they may even have planning approvals already in place. They're just not building on them yet. So the irony of this situation is that Mississauga basically has no white belt left, so land that can be developed on if the city chooses to allow it. So the city is the sole controlling entity. The green belt is, well, we want the green belt to be kept, and so it should be. And the further you get out of urban areas, the harder it should be to build, and the more hoops you should have to jump through, because we don't want people building willy-nilly on stuff like that. We want them building in or very close to existing municipalities. And Milton has that space. But like I say, I'm sure all that land is already owned by developers. So if it's not being built on, it's because the developers don't want to build on it yet. That's the only reason.
It should also be pointed out
it's not a matter of the cities really standing in the way.
Prior to the last election, the province came out with a housing report that we talked about it again on this podcast. In that report, the report said there's no need to go into the green belt. There's enough undeveloped white belt land to meet targets, as well as the notion of redeveloping some existing neighborhoods within municipalities. We could easily meet our targets without the need to go into greenbelt. So to keep the various bureaucracies that are there essentially to protect the greenbelt and prevent developers, as Roland said, from building willy-nilly on that plot of land. Yeah, I'm kind of like, let's keep it, because I do believe we have enough space existing to make this work. It's just it's easier just to pave into a piece of farmland than it is to go and redevelop an older derelict building.
And I'm going to use the example of, I know it's irritating when people who were born in other countries constantly raise other countries some kind of example of everything that's good. I'm not doing that. I promise you I'm not doing that. But it is just an example that I'm familiar with. So I grew up just outside London. The London Green Belt, which was put in place after the Second World War, was right on my doorstep. Everything that was green when I was 5 years old is still green. And there have been challenges to the green belt, and there's been the same stresses and strains that happen everywhere. Basically, London has not changed in terms of its Greater London has not changed in terms of its dimensions since way back before the Second World War. And yet in that same period, the population of London has gone up. I'm just trying to sort of Google it, but I'm going to guess it's at least doubled, if not more. So it's all about finding, fitting people in, increasing density, and actually many of the London boroughs have very few high rises because the councils there do have a fair amount of power. But despite that, they've managed to increase density and increase population. So this idea that the only way we can ever build houses is by going into green, building on green stuff is just demonstrably not true. And we speak in this sort of way that Ontario is short of land. It's like we live in the second biggest country in the world. We're not short of land. We're short of farmland, very short of farmable land that will produce food. So really, the last thing
We
you want to
kinda
do is
need that
build
to
on that
live.
stuff. Yeah, it's like unless you want to be completely or even more dependent on the states and the rest of the world to sort of keep us in anything other than beef and potatoes.
Yeah, we just
I-
basically need a rethink on how to use it.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that
essentially,
everything's
yeah.
kind of already
Yeah.
happened because the Places to Grow Act was all about increasing density and stopping sprawl. And this government's just, because this government is so utterly devoid of any kind of intelligence or ideas, the only way it can ever think to turn around a situation is to, just take away all the rules and then the things will sort themselves out.
Right.
And that, again, you look at the rest of the world, that's not how there's ever been success in development. Unless you want slums, unless you want to have us all living in favelas, which I don't think we do,
On that note, Roland, there's another angle of this I thought I'd throw out to you guys to pick apart. So I'm looking at the St. Catharines standard, and they're talking about in St. Catharines, they're being asked by the province to build 11,000 homes, and that's all. Well, they're asking the city of St. Catharines was interesting that they're trying to push back, say we need appropriate funding to go along with this this pledge that we're going to make, and that's the other part that I think is interesting is this urgency for the province to go to Milton, Burlington, St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Hamilton, wherever, and say, you need to build X thousand homes by 2031. But the province took away under the bill 23, the development charges that would go along with those developments, which again, there's problems with the mess of like the kind of pyramid Ponzi scheme nature of development from the municipal point of view. But the question I have is just how exactly do these municipalities pay for the cost of this, pay for the upkeep of sewers, hydro, road maintenance, all that stuff that will inevitably come along with this. If there is no middle density permitted to renovate these existing homes, and we're just supposed to keep building out, are basically cities being handed a bill of goods and no way of paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Burlington's Marianne Lee Ward made that point last week that they're looking at a sort of $36 million shortfall. And there's been all this sort of talk of the cities being made good, which is a very kind of sort of vague statement. It's like, we'll make sure that you're not losing out. Well, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of faith in any of that. So yeah, if I was the city, I wouldn't be signing any pledge of any kind to the province unless I had
the funding. Yeah. I know. Well, for instance, Milton, for at least as long as I've been working as a reporter since around 2009, 2010, and at least since then, Milton's been at least 2 schools behind in growth, and that issue has come up again and again as they've approved different developments. And within the last 18 months, a couple of years, obviously times for votes and time for the provincial election, our MPP from Gill has announced several new schools to try, but it's almost like a hamster wheel effect that they may never catch up.
I know
really to the development, because
when those schools open, I mean, it's a ridiculous situation of a brand new school opening already with temporary. I don't know what they call them. We used to call them portables. Portables. Yeah. So a brand new school open with like 20 portables outside. Yeah. It's like, well, what the hell? Maybe you should have built a bigger school. I don't know, but I guess that's a symptom of just how behind the whole situation is, and maybe they think one day those portables will disappear. But
I know when I back in the day, I used to attend a number of Halton Catholic school board meetings, and this was a major issue for them, was trying to plan where people were going to move. So like when, and this is a case in Milton, they were talking of, there's a new development slated to be built. So under legislation, they're able to go in and kind of say, well, we're going to take so much, kind of purchase land, so to speak, so that we can own that land, so that when you start building the neighborhood around it, we'll have a plot of land to build a elementary school on it. I don't know if that model necessarily is efficient to meet the demand, or meet because it's all based on projections, right? It's all based on we expect so many people and so many children to move into this neighborhood. Maybe we're talking about like there's I'm just spitballing here. Maybe the model idea is kind of outdated, that it just necessarily can't keep up with growth this way.
I mean, things will work themselves out eventually. I mean, the market reaches its level. I think the idea, everybody on all sides of the development, if you want to look at the public, the developers, and the various levels of government as a kind of three or arguably four kind of participants in the whole development thing, the only participant who gets anything out of the appeals process is the province, because that's where their power lies, is in the appeals. Developers don't want everything going to appeal because it's really, really expensive and it puts the cost of housing up and the rest. The city doesn't want everything to go to appeal because that means they're cut out of the process. Mm-hmm. So the developers and the cities would very much agree on the need for certainty at the start of the process rather than a constant negotiation process. So basically, any major development in this province is a process of negotiation between the city and the developer. That is where the LPAT acts as the arbiter. The rest of the world doesn't do it this way. The rest of the world says, okay, well, the city's the judge. And okay, if it's completely outrageous, then you have your legal recourse to say the city is being outrageous. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. Everybody will have something along those lines.
That's why we have elections.
Outrageous. Yeah.
That's why we have elections. Like
29% turnout rate.
Well,
yeah.
Which was absolutely dismal. But
and I mean, funny, you look at California as a sort of case in point where they have really strong councils, and arguably much too strong. And councils that, Los Angeles has something like 100 cities within it, or 50. I can't remember how many it is, but Los Angeles doesn't really exist. It's actually this amalgamation of completely inefficient, ridiculous municipalities that have, but basically where you can't get anything built because, the NIMBY thing is a problem, and there's no way of kind of controlling that. So you obviously have to get a situation where the balance of the needs of the larger community is balanced against the needs of a given street, but we have completely the opposite situation, and that situation where everything is appealed doesn't help anybody. I mean, it's like, was it good fences make good neighbors, or good certainty and boundaries and clarity help everybody to know, okay, well, there's no point appealing this because we know that the city says this, that's what's going to be built. Okay, so we'll put in the proposal that says that at the outset. No appeal, we can build it right away, no extra costs, and we're laughing. This idea that basically every official plan is a starting point of a conversation is not how it was supposed to work at the outset. No. The appeal should be by far the exception to the general rule of things being built within the plan. Any other solution just makes no sense whatsoever to anybody. It hurts everybody. It puts up costs for everybody. It slows down the process for everybody. Now, it still wouldn't fix everything because developers are sitting on a massive stockpile of approvals that they have in their back pockets. They're allowed to build and they're not building. Nothing that the province is doing with the cities is going to fix that problem. There's thousands and thousands of approvals that are just sitting there. So, like you said, Joe, I mean, either we have a situation where approvals simply expire after a number of years. It's like, okay, you haven't built, you don't have an approval anymore, go away. And that's kind of how it's meant to work now, but it doesn't actually. Or like you say, sort of just basically, fines for non-development. Well, there are clear ways in which this whole process could be improved, but no one has the political will. I'm not seeing it from the Liberals. I'm not seeing it from the NDP either, because they never talk about this stuff. So it's not like if there's a change of government, I think anything is going to improve. But there's clearly a way that this could be done if anybody had the stomach for it.
Yeah. Well, to go back to, there's a couple of points I think Joel brought up about financing and how that was going to work. In Milton, there's been within the last couple of years, there's been recent budget discussions where basically it's that residential growth is outpacing business growth. To explain that a bit further, businesses pay more taxes, so it's a problem because the tax base gets shifted over to the residents, who are struggling, as we all know, with affordability, with mortgage payments, with interest rates, with jobs, and on it goes. And so there's going to be, and there's also, so there's been like, I think I want to say pre-blending, I want to say around the 5 to 7% tax increase municipally. I'm not sure, without looking it up. So
it's around that, yeah, and that's the kind of numbers
it's
we're
around
seeing
that
across
for
the
Milton.
province. Yeah,
but that's supposed to pay. There's been this whole big thing for the last 10 years or so. Growth should pay for itself. And within the last, I don't know, two years, right prior to this last municipal election, they've started changing their tune a lot. That growth can't pay for itself, because you've still got to pay for resourcing. So all of your water, your hydro, etc., has to go into these new larger buildings, and streets and street paving and all the parks, etc. So the growth isn't paying for itself. It probably never did, and now it's almost so. Now it's on the residents' backs to pay for these things, new schools, etc., as apparently the development charges have been frozen. So,
yeah, but I mean, I heard someone say the other day with regard to Hamilton's new council, and it's like, oh, well, the taxes are going up. We've got this left-wing socialist council in Hamilton now. First thing they do is put the taxes up. It's like, I mean, that from the province's point of view is like game, set, and match. They're like, fantastic. We've done this thing where basically we have downloaded costs that developers should be paying for developing land onto the city. We've slashed development charges and made the city go and find that money, forcing the cities to put up taxes. And what do people do? They blame the council for those increased taxes. And it's like, well, it's nothing to do with Hamilton's new council. I mean, it's just like, well, either we slash everything, or we put up taxes just so we can keep the lights on at City Hall. But that, unfortunately, again, that's the way people think. It's like, oh, taxes got up. Obviously, the council are the ones who did that, because they're a bunch of leftists, And it's like, well, I think it was Vaughan or someone like that, which is hardly a bunch of leftists, were like predicting some crazy percent increase a few months ago. I don't know if it actually turned out that way in the end, but it was like 100% over 4 years or something like that.
East Gwillimbury was talking about that. I am going to say we're coming up on an hour in this episode. So I'm going to say let's put a pin in this conversation, because I suspect we're going to keep coming back to it. And yeah, I'd say, like, why don't we call it an end for this episode, and we'll pick it up some other time. So thanks very much, Laura, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.